I have often talked in this channel about how you can save your hobbies by improving yourself and how your hobbies can save you. And today I'm gonna dive even deeper into that, specifically and particularly into the archetypes in fiction, in whichever hobby we might have, right? Video games, books, role-playing games, and how that can help as a scaffolding for our own psyche to understand better our lives and to better understand ourselves. Now, as I said at the start of this video, I have spoken in the past about how the way to improve your hobbies is to improve yourself, right? Because a healthy hobbyist makes for a healthy hobby. So welcome to the HobbyGuard, and today I will talk to you about how archetypes and the archetypes that we attach ourselves to in fiction help us to improve, to grow. And it is like a totem spirit that we can summon and bring into our lives, as crazy as that sounds. So, without any further ado, let's get right into it. Well, I lied. As usual, I can't just jump right into a topic. I do have to give a couple of disclaimers. You might be wondering, who is this guy to tell me how to better improve my life using fiction or fantasy or sci-fi or games or video games or hobbies? What does he know? What certifications does he have? Does he carry? Well, my friend, I have a wizard hat, and that's all you need to know. That's the extent of my certifications and qualifications. I am, in this conversation, the person with the wizard hat, and traditionally speaking, that's all you need to know. Other than that, I can only say that I will speak only from my personal experience, and I will need you to transpose everything that I say from my personal experience and think of how it might apply to your own life, if it does at all. At the end of the day, not everything is for everyone, but if you are a fellow escapist who likes to take a trip into fictional universes within the theater of the mind, but you don't want to leave your own actual real life behind, you want to still keep leveling up in your life, well, then this video might be for you. As well as if you've been doing that for years and you feel, well, perhaps I could have done something better with my time, I hope that this video will help you better understand yourself, as well as this practice of channeling the archetypes of fiction and story and myth through your own life is something that has certainly better helped me to better understand myself. This sounds weird all at the start. I can only hope that it will become clearer as we progress through the video and through what I have planned. Quick disclaimer here, all the art that I will be showing in this video is my own art, and you can find it all on my Instagram. I will leave the link down below. Some of it is old, some of it is newer. I'm not a professional artist. I don't draw nearly as much as I should, as I would like to. I upload a couple of times a year, if at all. So yeah, take that for where it is. The other disclaimer, just before we jump right into the video, I slept for 3.5 hours perhaps today. Do bear with me. I hope I don't say anything that doesn't make much sense, but that being said, I will do my best to carry my ideas, to cross them over. I am a very busy person, so I may not have time to edit this video, but I may live edit it with the magic of the pause recording button. Where is my hat? So once again, the purpose of this video is to try to share with you how we can roleplay into our life without it being too fantastical or too cringe. Of course, it'll be cringe if we talk about it like I am doing now. I am biting the bullet for all those quiet escapists that, or autistic people, however you want to call them, that just don't talk about these things. But someone has to, and I am tired of pretending that this is not the case. So I will talk to you about how channeling archetypes has helped me cope with reality, but if you do it in a healthy, mature, courageous way, courageous is an important word here, and you take chances. Basically, you can use escapism, quote unquote escapism, to get out of your comfort zone and grow. So let me give you an example from the past. Indeed, I will give you an example from the past. One of the oldest archetypes that I felt attached to was the hero without a father, because I did not grow up with my father. I did not have a father figure for most of my life, and so heroes like Luke Skywalker were very important to me because, well, I didn't know my father. I knew about him, of course, I would hear stories, but I would never get the chance to meet him, to talk to him, and so I sort of had to rely on these archetypes to push me through that young stage of life. Nowadays, most kids' parents are like, if not divorced, most kids know someone who's divorced. Back in my day, because I'm an old timer now, it was, people will make fun of you if your parents were not together, right? So that's one of the first archetypes that really helped me push through my early years. Thankfully for me, I was very lucky because when I was a bit older, probably 5 to 6 years old, probably around 6 years old, a movie you might have heard of called The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring came out. And this was not my introduction to fantasy, but boy, was it a breakthrough in my little kid brain into the fantasy realm. And I immediately grew hyper fixated with the elves in The Lord of the Rings, specifically Legolas. Now, of course, this is all hindsight. I think, looking back, that because obviously I watched The Lord of the Rings and I immediately began consuming all sort of fantasy media, whichever books and stories I could get my hands into, even like pulp stories, pulp fantasy stories about elves and so on. So now, elves are not traditionally masculine, right? They don't have very many masculine traits. They're not particularly aggressive, right? They are graceful, they are artistic, they are dexterous, they are soft. Now, why do you think this young kid, this young boy, who had no father figure and in fact had 2 older sisters and 1 mom, which translates to pretty much 3 moms, would feel attached or interested by that archetype, right? Well, I think, looking back in hindsight, I think I needed to hang on to that archetype because as a young boy, I still had this fascination for battling, right? And violence and war, because, kids, you grab a toy as a kid, and if you're a boy, you use it as a sword, right? If you grab a stick. Yeah, I believe that I needed the archetype of the elf to show that perhaps I could still strive to become a badass, even if I didn't have these masculine traits, because obviously when you're young, you perceive other kids as their own independent people, which they are, obviously, but they're persons, I guess. But they're, for the most part, just copying, imitating their parents. So my friends, my male friends, would be imitating their own parents, and they would act more manly than they obviously were, right? In the end, they were just boys, and I just didn't have anyone to imitate, but I was still interested in becoming a badass. So little things like, well, by the way, I was an actor, I was a theater kid my whole life, right? So things like, well, I am into the arts, but what if I was into martial arts, I am into drawing, but what if I was into drawing cool, violent, edgy stuff? I am into, again, acting, but what if I acted fight scenes? And I did act fight scenes back in the day. I was kind of a hardcore kid. I had fight scenes in national TV. So my point is, that archetype helped me cope with the lack of a parental male figure in my life. As well as, well, obviously the elves are outsiders, right? They come from like a different realm. And me being a young kid and an actor, being on national TV and having no father and being raised by women, I always felt like this outsider to the group of kids, right? I'm not applying any value judgment onto like my past or how I was raised or anything. I'm just stating the facts, how I felt. And it makes sense that I would feel attracted to the character of Legolas. Of course, nowadays I am a stud, I am a chat, I am based. I don't think of elves as cool. I think elves are a bunch of knife-eared that need to hit the gym and lift some weights, because I am dwarf peeled nowadays, but I am a better man. I am a superior human being. Back in the day, I was just a little boy and I did not know any better. I have a literal drawing of the Shire here. I don't know why I didn't use that through that whole other segment. I can even see Gandalf there in the corner, but anyways, let's keep going. 15, maybe 16 years. And by this point I've become absolutely possessed by the archetype of the Nordic Viking hero. The man who writes his own saga, who yearns and chases after glory in battle, chases after challenges, and well, that was just me trying to break out of the shell, trying to, well, like actually looking for tougher fights because I was obsessed with martial arts at this point, but also, you know, trying to do more exercise, trying to talk to more girls because I was very shy before this point, and I had had some very embarrassing experiences. I had had girlfriends and everything, but again, very many embarrassing experiences. So just break the shell and jump out of the nest and get out of my comfort zone. So let me take you a few more years into the future, since I got engaged, the first time I got engaged, at the age of 19, and me and my fiancée at the time, we moved over to the United States of America. We, both of us coming from Mexico, and we tried starting a new life there, but of course, us being incredibly young, we made mistakes, the inevitable happens, and thus we break up. And my world, everything that I thought I had, everything that I thought I knew just crumbles. I wasn't particularly against breaking up. I didn't know where to go from there. And then I get possessed by this other archetype, the archetype of the chosen undead, the Ashen Hollow from Dark Souls, or the Death Knight from World of Warcraft, as I am also playing World of Warcraft religiously at this point, as well as Dark Souls. And this Death Knight character that I get possessed by, well, is the will to keep going even when you feel like you're dead inside. It's the need to not give in to the abyss of depression, because, mind you, at this point I am living in Miami as a 21-year-old, I think I was at the time, and you can imagine the amount of, how can I put this, temptations that I was faced with, the amount of vices and immoral choices that were placed in front of me. And yet, even though I saw no good in my life, because again I was very, very depressed at this point, I had to believe in something greater and in that inner flame. So like that Death Knight or that Ashen Hollow, I had to rise up over and over again each day and carry on, push through, try to find another job, try to do something with my life. I had to give up on some of my dreams because, for example, at this point I thought I was gonna be able to study drawing, like study professional drawing, not just like study from books, but I wanted to go to college or university. You know, my dreams got shattered when I figured I cannot even pay for this, and I'm not even that good at drawing. For example, this drawing is from like 11 years ago. I was already 21, 22. I was not that good at drawing by that age. Most kids who enter college at that age would have would my ass with their skill. Well, you look at that. I had another elf here. I should have used this elf, but again, this is World of Warcraft, sorry. And you know, I am fully committed to this undead archetype since I feel dead inside, but something weird starts to happen. I start, like that small flame, those embers that were inside my soul start to kindle, and something starts to burn up. And sometimes I feel like, hey, I'm being too lazy. Maybe I should be hitting the gym more often. Maybe I should start practicing martial arts again, hitting a dojo, just doing something with my life, right? Finding a new job. And I slowly but surely stopped playing so much with my emo, edgy Death Knight in World of Warcraft, and I create an orc warrior tank. My first tank, mind you. Eventually I would play a Death Knight tank, but that was many years down the road. No, my first tank. So I get possessed by this strange vitality that came out of nowhere from the past and possessed me again, and I start training. I start getting more jacked than I've ever been before at that point, and I get a job, and then I get another job on top of that job, and I start to pile up my money, and all of a sudden I'm able to pay my own rent, and I start renting, like getting roommates so that I can pay for a bigger apartment. And all of a sudden, I am leading a very tough life, at 23, but I am doing fairly well for myself. I am feeling this vitality, and so I find other relationships that I can push myself into being, right? I have the courage to start new relationships that sort of help me drag myself out of that void of hopelessness that I was in for so many years, for so many months rather, not years. And let's take another leap way into the future. Many years after that, I am back in Mexico. I am living an entirely different life. I have a bunch of projects. I have my own YouTube channel that is becoming very successful, and I am doing martial arts pretty much for a living. I have other jobs, obviously, but pretty much for a living I'm doing martial arts. I take on my first kickboxing fight, and then I have to go into a very tough diet and training just in preparation for this fight, right? So at this point I start watching the show, what was it called? Nightfall, the Netflix show Nightfall, about the Knights Templar, and I get possessed by the archetype of the Templar, since I'm already living this ascetic sort of life regarding the training and the not eating. In other aspects of the ascetic monk life, I was not definitely applying myself to that morality, which will come in play later down the road. But anyways, I just give myself into my training, and I say goodbye to all the Mexican goodies of the culinary Mexican goodies that we have, so that I can make weight, and I start training way harder, and I get possessed by the Templar, the Crusader in me, the warrior monk. And indeed, I make it to my fight thanks to my ascetic discipline. But if you will take your eyes on the screen here real quick, I want to describe something that happened to me in that fight. I am giving it my all against my opponent until I notice, give it a sec here, at some point after a hit there, my opponent drops his mouth guard, and I have free reign to kick his face. Just let it rip, and I stop my kick short. Why? Because I don't feel comfortable. Now that may seem very nice to you, but in a kickboxing fight, and this is what my crew told me, well, we were practicing Muay Thai, but this was a kickboxing fight. I could have lost that fight right after they stopped it for that, right? Because I stopped my kick and I point to his corner. Hey, his mouth guard fell off, and you can see it there on the floor, which meant a mental block, right? A psychological block, something that would not allow me to kick my opponent, whereas my opponent was rightfully so trying to knock my head off, you know. So that got me thinking for my next fight rather, I have to become a lot more aggressive. Now I wonder, a different type of warrior who is again very zealous but very, very violent, very aggressive, who won't stop at anything to achieve what he thinks is right, what he thinks he must do. And so I get possessed by a different archetype for my next fight and enter the Space Marine. And so throughout this whole entire training camp, I obviously have a bunch of Space Marine drawings. I just want to brag about my fight. I'm also showing this not only to brag, but also to show you that these things have actual consequences. There's actual physical effects to this sort of mindset. Throughout my entire next fighting camp, I just get possessed by the Astartes mindset, and I'm thinking, no retreat, no surrender, not one step back, for the Emperor, for humanity. And I just keep going every day through training, and I am focused on not making the same mistake on the day of the fight, and so I don't, and I just ravage my opponent. Very tough fight, by the way. I was not particularly a great fighter. I obviously still had issues with being hitting hard enough. I guess I still feel bad, but there's a point in this fight. Let me look it up for you, because there's a point in this fight right there, where he's like literally walking away from me, and I thought, well, should I just let him walk away? And I could hear the voice of my of my crew in my head from last fight saying, you keep hitting him until the referee stops the fight. And so I did, and lucky for me, I took the victory. And sure, I was more aggressive, and in the end I talked to my opponent, and we were like super cool, super chill with each other. I shared my lunch with him and everything. What I never told him is that while I was warming up for the fight, I was listening to the song by Storm. I guess it's like he mixed it up with, it's from someone else, I don't know, but the song is called Warriors of the God Emperor, and it's all about Astartes and the Guard, the Imperial Guard, the Astra Militarum. And I was just kept hearing that song in my head over and over and over and over again, just priming my mind, my brain for combat, for brutal hand-to-hand combat. And it was so fun, and it was so exciting. And would he feel kind of embarrassed if he knew that he just fought an autistic nerd who was listening to a Warhammer song? He probably wouldn't even know what Warhammer is, because he's probably so much cooler than me, and yet I took the victory that day because I was able to channel the archetype of the holy space warrior. Long live Space King, right? So, yeah, well, that was a very, very interesting experiment. But, well, you know what? Life takes turns. You know, I had many good things happen to me during this period of time. I had met who would become my future wife by then, but I also lived through some tragedies in my life, and I stopped making YouTube videos about martial arts because my computer broke down, and then I had this very loved one that passed away under very tragic circumstances, and the way that I had to deal with that, it was very, very dark, very psychologically damaging. I was okay, I was still functioning, but at this point I had a job at a warehouse. It was sort of like warehouse manager, so there was a lot of office work involved, and so I would get to draw a lot during work, as well as listen to audiobooks, as well as a lot of labor and heavy lifting, of course, for hours a day, 8 to 9 hours every day. And I would also have a crisis of faith, a crisis of consciousness, and I was faced with my unorthodox lens through which I experienced life. Oops, I hit the mic, sorry about that. And my neurodivergence and my ADHD, and how hard it was for me to get a grasp on the real world, on the things that you need to function through, like, properly in a job like that, right? You need to be very organized, very, like, for, I guess, neurotypical people it's a lot easier. For me it was a lot harder at the time. But anyways, the point is, I am at this point reading Gaunt's Ghosts, the Warhammer series of books about the Tanith First and Only, and the Commissar Colonel Gaunt. And it's a very beautiful series of books. Some of my favorite, some might disagree, but I really, really like them. And I get possessed by the archetype of the Guardsman, who, for example, in this case, Hlain Math Larkin, the master sniper of the Tanith First and Only, he has literal hallucinations. He's literally schizophrenic, and he forgets his meds, and he starts seeing hallucinations, and he has to summon the will to focus to take a shot because his entire company is depending on him to take the damn shot, and he has to channel that inner strength, and he pulls through. By the Emperor, damn it, he does. And then I start to feel more kinship towards the Blood Angels. This is about the time that I finally start to have enough money to buy my first miniatures, because Warhammer is extremely expensive in Mexico compared to how much we get in a regular job. And I literally am paying my first box set for the next 3 months. But anyways, that's besides the point. I relate to the Blood Angels because at this point in my life I have become addicted and reliant on on a couple of substances. and I start to realize the weakness that reliance on those substances. Even though I perceive them as making me stronger, nothing illegal, mind you, stuff that I would make me more unhealthy in the long run. And I have this horrible withdrawal period where I start to fight with my own addiction towards these substances. And well, who else is fighting addiction and has constant withdrawal? Well, the Blood Angels, right? And so I have a lot of kinship to this chapter. But then a few years after that, my life takes other turns, and me and my girlfriend at the time, we make a plan. We decide to get married, and we make a plan to go and live together in a new country. And so the very free, independent, liberal life that I used to have until then has to change completely, and I have to get married, and I have to move to a country that I've never visited before until this point. And I have to, all my previous work experience is no longer transferable to where I'm going, and so I need to get possessed by another fantasy archetype once again, but this time it's the dwarf. And not any dwarf, but the dwarf cleric or the dwarf paladin, because not only are they industrious, but they make oaths and they have faith. And they, just like I, have to have a lot of faith, because I'm about to take a huge leap of faith, and I sell everything that I have, and I make huge sacrifices, and I burn all my ships to get there. And I get there, and I get married, and I move over to a different country, and eventually I find a job after a long time of searching every day, and I work my ass off at that job because I am possessed by the spirit of the dwarf. And every day the dwarves arise, heading for the mountain mine. No more time to waste, we're on the way, for the mountain full of gold awaits, and we mine till the morning light. Anyways, I don't want to keep quoting Windrose to you, but you should listen to that band if you're into that sort of stuff. And just like that, I could keep talking to you for ages and ages about all the archetypes based off fantasy and sci-fi and just any fictional world that I feel an association with, that I get a fixation with, and how I use those and I implement those to sort of get guidance through my own life, right? Like, as I mentioned before, it works as a scaffolding that helps you through the toughest moments. And obviously it's not the only thing, right? There's music, there's friends, there's family, but the thing is, no matter what you're into, you can use escapism, your escapism, whatever that is, to become a healthier, strongest person. Well, not whatever that is, right? As long as it's something, as you do it in a healthy, balanced way, you can use that. So if you're as autistic as I am, as neurodivergent as I am, and sometimes, perhaps call it ADHD or whatever it is, I don't have a diagnosis, so I cannot speak. I would just call it an inclination for bilateral, magical, interdimensional thinking. It makes life more interesting, more bearable. Like, the world is crazy anyways. I realize this may sound cringe to a lot of people, but to me, a lot of people sound cringe. To me, being a normie sounds cringe. And again, I could talk to you about this, for hours, but I don't intend to steal any more of your time. This video has been long enough, and I could tell you more about the wizard hat and where it comes from, but that's not the point. Right now, I don't want you to think about me. Right now, I want you to think about you and about how these things might help you, in case you haven't figured this out yet. Perhaps you've never done this. Let me know if you've never done this. Let me know if you think I'm absolutely crazy and I belong in an insane asylum, but also do let me know, please, if you suspect that you've done this in the past, if you suspect that I'm not the only one. I would love to read all about it. And again, the only reason I talk so much about myself for so long, to give all of these examples, is that you may try to see how some of those things you might have applied in your own life, even sometimes without realizing, as I did in the past. So, with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you wanna see more. If you wanna see more content like this, if you like this channel to level up, please like and subscribe. And again, leave your comments down below, good, bad, whatever it is. I can only learn from them. I'll see you on the next one. Ad Astra, and remember, there are no female custodies.